Sing, Happy, sing.
La 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 la. Happy birthday to her.
Till the stars come down until we are found.
When I started writing my first album, Hope Handwritten, I'd made these 3 EPs of 5 or 6 songs each that I put together without obsessing very much over the bigger picture of the project. Whereas going into this album, I knew I wanted to make something that had a real flow and a story and a structure to it. I just didn't know how to. So I spent 3 or 4 years learning and also living my life and writing it all down, and Hope Handwritten came into being through that process. I wasn't necessarily imposing certain themes onto the project, but now when I listen back, there are themes that really stand out to me, such as despair and heartbreak, selfhood, love, and the main theme, which to me is the crux of the album, which is hope, hence the title. The title has various different meanings, but a huge one, which I don't think I realised really until quite late into the writing process and after landing on the title, is the fact that the main through line or story of the album is losing hope and then finding it again. The first song that I can remember writing that felt like it really was dealing with some of the despair I was experiencing while I wrote Hope Handwritten was I Can't Even Cry. And I think the reason I was ever able to write that song was because I was writing it with Anoop at his house and writing with someone I'd been friends with before working together for the first time. I think I can be quite a guarded person in creative environments. I wrote all my early music at home by myself, and I still don't think I fully adjusted to being able to write lyrics in the same room as other people. It can definitely still be a challenge. But with this song, I was lucky enough to find myself in a creative environment with someone who knew what I was going through, so I didn't have to hold anything back. When I wrote I Can't Even Cry, I'd had some time to process what was happening in my life at the time, but I still felt very desperate and uncertain about the future, quite weak and numb, I suppose. Just experiencing something very new for me where I wasn't able to cry or express myself in the ways that had always come very easily and naturally to me. I've always been a very emotional, sensitive person. I've always been a big crier, but for the first time, I felt like I couldn't even do that. And so writing this song was so cathartic because it felt like I really got to the truth of what I was feeling. And for me, that's always the main goal with songwriting, to really reach the heart of an emotion and translate it accurately and with love and understanding. And it's just this magical process where you're able to connect with yourself and maybe the chords come together in just the right way. It's hard to know what the recipe is, but when it happens, it's a very special feeling. I just remember Anoop playing me that guitar part and just feeling so connected to it on a soul level. And then it was just the perfect storm of having that musical element that felt so correct, and then also being with a close friend and making a song together for the first time and making it in a home that I'd spent time in with loved ones. So that writing experience that day will always be so important to me, and that song really sort of opened the gates for some songwriting that felt very vulnerable and honest. Something that's quite a big part of my emotional life, I would say, is that I have a very intense relationship with nostalgia, and I also really struggle to deal with change, and I think those two things are connected, and I think they both made their way into the music. Kind of around the time I made this album, I had fallen into quite an existential headspace and began to have a lot of uncertainty about the future. I was struggling to adjust to not being in full-time education anymore, which I'm sure makes me sound like the biggest nerd alive, but I really did struggle with that. And I started spending a lot of time away from home and away from London because of work. And that definitely led to songs like Growing Pains that interrogate nostalgia and feeling like I'm in the world by myself for the first time, learning how to deal with change and growing up. Obviously the clues in the name with that one. But I wrote that song in early 2021, which is now over 4 years ago, and it's almost weirdly reassuring to think about how I still feel so nostalgic, even more so sometimes than I did then. Knowing that these big feelings and questions will probably always come up in my life, that it's not the first time I've felt this thing really acutely, is a really nice thing to realise in a way. That's what's been so great about my musical journey so far, is that I found so much amazing community and so much reassurance and solace that nothing I'm feeling is new. That, we might be experiencing these things at different times in our lives, but, it's all universal stuff. And to me, at least, that is very encouraging. And then in 4 more years' time, when I'm feeling nostalgic again about something, maybe I'll have a listen to Hope Handwritten. I must have changed the order of the songs on this album hundreds of times. I tried so many different ways of sequencing it, and none of them really felt right unless I was really just relying on gut instinct. But it's interesting how a story emerged from those gut-led placements, I guess. So for example, I definitely hear an evolution of the kinds of love songs on the album. Jumping the Gun is the one I see as the first love song, but it's more about unrequited yearning compared to some of the later ones which are talking about a more kind of genuine, reciprocated, all-consuming, would do anything for this person kind of love. And then Phoenix, for example, is about platonic love, and Fall Too Hard is about being scared to fall in love with someone, and then Lose My Mind and Bad Love God are about like the obsessive early stages of love. Shiver is really about surrender. Miracle is about how love can make you question whether some higher power might exist, how love might make you open your eyes to something you never thought that you could believe in. And then Heartbeat, the End, really like sums everything up. In that song, I hear traces of the agnostic questions that present themselves throughout the album, and traces of all the different kinds of love that lift me up in my life and were kind of explored on the album. I think that's why I and every other writer, it seems, keep coming back to writing about love. Like, there are so many different kinds of love, and even within each kind, there are so many different experiences you can have of it, if that makes sense. And like, I'm obviously constantly changing as a person, and I think that means my experience of love and the way I view it and talk about it changes as well. I think every given writer would probably be able to write a different song about love every day of their life, because we wake up every morning with fresh eyes and we're different than we were the day before, even if it's just a tiny imperceptible amount. We wake up with new experiences under our belt. So of course you're going to talk about what kind of is, in my opinion, the most important emotion or experience in our lives differently. Like, it's altered in some way every day. As all things are, I guess. I don't know. I don't know. What can be really interesting about working on a project or a body of work is that there are certain things that you do in an intentional way, and then there are other things that kind of happen by accident. And agnosticism is a theme that comes up a lot when I listen to the album, that I didn't intentionally choose to explore. It just very much happened naturally, because that's a huge question that's been coming up for me over the past few years, something that is in my subconscious a lot, and often things in my subconscious come out in my writing. I think particularly when you're in a difficult place and struggling with your mental health, as I was during a lot of the making of this album, those questions about what are we here for, what is going on here, start coming up more and more often. So obviously Bad Love God is a clear example of that. But then that kind of theme definitely exists in songs like Miracle, Magical Medicine, Heartbeat, the End as well. Heartbeat always made sense as the final song to me, because it really pulls together a lot of the questions I had when I was writing Hope Handwritten, and it's also the song on that album that feels the most ambiguous to me, because I definitely wrote it about my partner and the love I feel for her, but I also listen to it now and I think about all of these other types of love that exist in my life, familiarly, ancestrally, and that song really drives home the main message of the album, which is that even in the midst of despair, and during the writing of the album I had a lot of moments where I wondered what the point of life is. Even if it's just these glimmering, transient moments of love and joy, like being at a party with your friends and dancing and thinking, wow, I'm having the best night ever. Or if it's having an intimate moment with a loved one where you feel like they're really understanding you and what you're going through. Or if you're feeling like a profound connection to a song or something, whatever it is, even those instantaneous moments that are fleeting really prove to me that there is really a point to this thing called living. And I think that when I was really struggling through some of the experiences that I had during the making of this album, those moments really kept me going and kept me hopeful.
I start thinking about the end, about the end, about the end. I start thinking.